Hey everyone, today we're going to have a good little chat. Harry and I are co-partners, I suppose, on Marketing Unfiltered. We decided today to jump into why the CMO role is at where it's at the moment. And there's a lot of discussion around the CMO title and what it does. So Harry, do you want to give like a really quick introduction to, and
Yeah,
then we'll dive into some questions?
yeah, sure. Now, some of you might know me, and for those who don't, I'm Harry Lang. I've been floating around marketing roles, both in agency and latterly sort of marketing director, CMO, VP for the last 25 years. 17 years of that was spent in online gaming and gambling, and now I run Brand Architects as a consultancy.
Been there, seen it, done it, basically.
Just old, mate.
Right. So let's start with the most obvious question we should probably answer is the CMO title is like a hot topic. Should we talk around how we sort of got to today and why there's such a hotly debated subject?
Yeah, no, so I was thinking about this morning and sort of doing the history lessons and without getting too boring about it. In the old days, marketing director was the top job. You're a marketing director and above you was a CEO or an MD, depending on the size of the business. But then, with the emergence of the big global corporates, you got marketing director for X and Y brand, you got loads of sub brands, you got loads of geos, you got loads of different formative companies coming under one umbrella. And marketing director didn't cut it because you had loads of them. So you needed to find a way to have someone who was responsible for all the marketing directors. And my belief is that that's where the CMO came from. It had a C-suite title, which would have appeased many egos back in the day because it feels nice and chunky. You sit alongside CFOs, COOs, all the big cheeses, CEOs, your boss. That's all well and good. And that would have been fine because marketing director or VP of marketing in the States then reports into a CMO, and you can have lots of the former and you can have one of the latter. And crucially, it was a singular role. You were the final port of call for all things marketing across how many business units you had. That's great. And then we strayed. We started to stray. And this is probably what we're going to talk a lot about today in this podcast is why did that straying into chief revenue officer, chief customer officer, chief brand officer, chief market officer was one I heard the other day, maybe want to vomit. What happened with that? And what was wrong with the CMO title as being the king of marketing reporting to the CEO? Because in my opinion, that would have done the job. And no, let's get your take, Danny. Why did that stop doing the job and why do we get this mess that we're in now?
For me, there's three areas, and one area is the CMO title and role became quite big and quite grand and very broad. And we're in this point where there's too many channels. And my belief is what happened, say, 10 years ago was there was a splintering of what the CMO did or didn't do. And the more channels that got, popped on, we've got further and further away from 1980s, 1990s, 2000s CMO. And what a lot of people did was they tried to change the title or encompass or incorporate other business lines or other areas to roll into. So the CEO, the Chief Customer Officer, was the one that came out for a while, was where you really you owned the customer service, the customer support. It was really what the CMO started to do a while ago, but it was more emphasis on that. The CGO is the most obvious one. We in the UK, our interpretation is very different to what it is elsewhere. So growth has folded into it, which is what for me, when I've been a CGO, it's product and marketing together. And so when we've had a look at and changing all the different variations, it just depends on the company size, what the company narrative wants to be, how they want to attach a message or internal message and an external message to that. So there's a lot of bias in there, and there's a lot of evolution as opposed to revolution. But my hot take on the CMO title pretty much is it's all environmental. It's everything that's around you within the business that all takes into consideration what it is or isn't. And you'll know from applying for roles recently and having a look in the market, the CMO role is either super broad or very narrow now. So it's just this constant change.
Yeah, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago around specifically chief growth and chief revenue officer and how the inclusion of sales under that mandate is, sales was never under a CMO remit. You're responsible for all things marketing, and at the point of sale, you hand over, whether it's brand at the top of the funnel or direct response and performance coming down, and then you hand over to sales, and sales are responsible for basically that getting people over the line part, which again leans much more heavily into B2B and SaaS than it ever did in B2C. In B2C, that conversion funnel, the CRO element, and then retention and CRM afterwards, that was all marketing remits and customer facing things that marketing was responsible for. You bring sales into it, and then chief growth and chief revenue officer, and that exploded within a B2B and underneath B2B SaaS, which seems to be obsessed as an industry with reinventing buzzwords and things for various reasons. And then that mess, where does that line end? Because then you start creeping over towards operations. And as you said, product gets pulled into that. What happened to the chief product officers? For me, product was very distinct and a hugely defined set of skills. Quite a few of them very technical indeed, not under the remit or the skill base of most CMOs. So by overgrowing and overreaching into some of those areas and making this role under CRO, CGO, all encompassing, who is that person? Do they even exist? Have they ever existed? And my guess would be in startups, yeah, everyone wears all the hats because you haven't got enough people or money to do a proper hiring job. You don't need to at that stage. But in latter stage companies, Jesus, you need specialists. You need people who've got the 10 years plus of experience of doing products in that particular vertical. Marketing's got enough channels going, which we're expected to be pretty much, working great at, especially in a large international organization. How the hell are you meant to be good at product and a sales expert, have the time and capacity to run a sales organization, which, my limited exposure to, that's a hell of a lot of work, both days and nights, to even come close to hitting targets. And that sort of made this cross these titles have come to bear. It's impossible. No one can do all of that. And yet we've got the titles and kind of it's a meeting of ego and aspiration meets the impossible wall of no one human can do all these things successfully. And the ego is, I want bigger titles, I want more responsibility, I want more money, give me more share options because I'm a bigger piece. I'm second only to the CEO. So I'm a hero in my own mind, in my peers' minds. And then I don't deliver because I can't deliver across all of that because no one in the world ever could. And that for me is kind of one of the crux points of all of this. We've made this, I think I've called about assisted suicide in marketing in the past in one of our newsletters. We've made a lot of this off our own backs as an industry. And actually there is this need just to look at reality, like who can do what, who's required to do what. And there's no one fixed answer, which again brings confusion to the people who make decisions, to the CEOs and the boards out there. Every company is different with different needs, every single one. And then marketing is an imperfect science anyway, so every day is different. So you smash all that together and you've got a billion potential outcomes and you've got to pick one. You've got to pick one and be right. So that's rarely, if ever, going to happen. So I think that's the mess we're kind of in.
I made it in a previous conversation that I had with Chris, and we talked around content and marketing content and how that's evolved. Is we're in this loop now, or this circular sort of movement where when you're at a larger firm, you have someone who say is like brand first, like typically an older school marketeer who was brand heavy and that was their background. And then we moved to this more performance style CMO who came in and concentrated more on performance marketing. And then what happened was the brand got delegated or was almost sort of relegated underneath. So then you have to make a change to bring in another brand or a brand focused CMO. And then again, it changes to performance. And often what we're seeing is if this is happening over and over and over again, you've got such shorter and shorter windows to have A, impact, B, have internal or external impact. You're really going to struggle with people at the C-suite to really buy into that role. And I, having spoken to a number of different companies and through coaching and consulting recently, there are sometimes I'm brought in to work out what they actually need. And very often it is someone who truly understands brand, who has a true vision around what performance really means for that business. But then they need the supplementary services of all the others. So as a CMO now, you've got this really tricky spot. Whereas how do you prioritize effectively what skill set that you need to bring in, nurture and develop around? So often it's the case.
Yeah, there's like a tautology here though, because by its very definition, brand takes longer. by its very definition, performance can happen tomorrow. You can turn on the taps on PPC and paid social and see numbers and metrics getting hit. You put $10 million into Google in a month, things are going to happen, but it's linear. It doesn't have incremental growth capability. You pay what the market tells you to pay per click, and you convert what your capability is as a business or as a product, whether it's digital or B2B and going through sales functions. At least things happen immediately with performance. Whereas with brands, you need to have a CEO and a board who A, gets it and has seen it in action and understands the value, and B, gives you the time to actually see it through. Now, if you sort of think about a 5-year cycle from the start of a sort of brand refresh all the way through to bringing something to fruition, so your maximum capacity as a brand, no one gets 5 years anymore. No one gets 5 years in a hot seat. So, and that's for various reasons, of which this is one. So you're effectively then inheriting from somebody else, which you may or may not agree with. Meanwhile, the world has moved on, competitors have moved on, the markets have moved on, legislation's moved on. And you're then picking up the pieces and going, well, we're still going to spend on brand. But then someone up top goes, well, you need to just cut some money because we're not performing, accounts need to be culled, we need to cut some spends. And then the brand becomes the easier cut because you're not being held accountable because you can't be for a couple more years. So you think, well, I just need to get some numbers up. So performance it is, pour into that bucket. There's lots, I believe, lots of cycles, like the one you said, but there's cycles in terms of how you're attributing strategically and tactically that can cull your ability to succeed on a proper level. And how many CEOs out there are the ones who are brand X performance truest? Some very famous founder CEOs who started off, understanding this equation, and their brands thrived as a result because they always kept their foot on the gas. They were the ones driving it, saying, this is how we do it. And their marketing team was never in any doubt because it wasn't a marketing strategy, it was a business strategy. For the rest of us, you sort of go cap in hand every year and say, right, here's the budget I want. I want 55% brand. I want 60% brand. This is why. And then we get challenged. And then you do your usual silly dance when the CFO says, well, by the way, we need to get 35% greater performance out of all of this. And you go, well, shit, I've been in this job for a year and bonus time's coming up and I don't really want to lose this job because I've got mortgage bill to pay and whatever else. Well, it's just easy. It's just easy to go, right, cull the brand one. I'll try and make the case for next year where I'm a bit more family embedded. My relationships are stronger. And then it never happens because the world moves on. You probably get fired for various reasons, including performance. And the circle begins again. And these are the messes that I think a lot of our peers in the industry are finding themselves in. They know what a proper job looks like, but very rarely do they get to do a proper job. And ergo, their level of influence, their capability to influence diminishes because they aren't able to be seen as the best of what they can be. And that's one of the most frustrating things for me is it's a really, really hard job to do well, being a CMO or a senior marketing leader in any business. And yet it's inherently way harder straight away because of external influence. And that's maddening. And sometimes you just wish you just studied accountancy and become a CFO and just lied about numbers and pretended to make up forecasts every few months. I mean, that seems nice. They seem to stay in their job for ages. So,
but there's a few things that I think we should go into a little. I'd love to go into a little bit more. Leaders lead, right? So if you're the most senior marketing lead or leader, CMO or another title, it's your job to know what's going to be successful and what isn't. So when you go forward and you're making these recommendations to the C-suite, they're not asking your permission. What they want you to do is come up and say, here's my plan. And if they're going into levels of detail into channels, there's probably a lower end of trust there. So you need to step up on that. So that's always a recommendation I make in coaching is you're not there to ask for permission. You're there to tell the company confidently what changes. And I think the subtle, obviously the business world has changed slightly in the last, let's say 6 years. But what you should be able to do is have a confidence level. And I always say cautiously confident in what's going to work, what isn't going to work. And if you're going there and saying, oh, here's a 60-40 split and we're going to do brand, all you're doing is you're shoving red flags in people's faces and you're making them worry. So I think actually what a lot of the takeaway from most people should be is don't go in and break down everything into minutiae detail. but have that confidence to say, here's what we're going to do, here's where we're going to spend it, and predict with confidence the results that are going to come out.
Do you know the thing that in terms of long term, that upwards education is what's required? Because your way in real life, don't get me wrong, I've been that guy. I've done that version to try and squeeze things through and get the TV budget for the brand campaigns, etc. But long term, if we're going to get out of this crux and get a seat at the proper table, the senior C-suite where real decisions are actually made, don't we need to keep on educating as to why it needs to be that way, why that is the optimum way of doing things? Or do you just think this is our responsibility just to get the good result through and get the right budget, the right things through at any cost?
You should be educating all the time. As I have said in our SEO chat with Kyle, basically your whole job is to educate, like all the time with your peers. So if you think about it, most people in the senior titles probably heard of first team. So it's your C-suite generally. And then your whole job is to spend a lot of your time with the founder or CEO and then in leadership team meetings. So you should be educating all the time there. Then your team, your marketing management layer, or it's the teams underneath in that department, you should also be trying to coach them and manage them through this. And actually, if you're going in there and you're only doing it on the budget and you're only giving them the budget and the breakdown and tagging while it is, if there's no reference point and they're only referring back to the prior year's budget, you're in a weak position because they've only got like for like, it is apples and oranges to compare, but you're not comparing to the right level. There's another element like to this where when you're a CFO or an equivalent FD, you're very often actually one of the ultimate decision makers, if not the ultimate decision maker. The famous example recently is where the Apple CFO told Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, that they couldn't spend the money on AI. So this is like a big misunderstanding, and this is where the relationships are really important to build up, not only with the CEO, not only with the CPO, and they're often your biggest sparring partners, but being deliberate with the CFO. And if the CFO is making those really deliberate decisions on your behalf, there is also another big problem. Your job as a C-suite executive is A, to be an executive, and B, to be a department lead. So what you need to do is be the executive and be smart in IQ, EQ, and PQ. PQ for me is political intelligence. If you're not being really smart about how you talk around something, how you pitch it, how you get other people bought into it, your tenure is going to reduce month by month because you don't have that buy-in, you don't have that relationship. The other element is CMOs often report into COOs now or into another or CRO. So very often it is a different reporting line. If you have that, you're going to have to spend a lot more time in a skip meeting to go into the CEO or the CFO and build those relationships. And that's something many people don't do or don't feel like they have the opportunity to do it. But that's where I think one of my top tips is to build those relationships and ensure that people understand what you're doing while bringing your team on board. And if you don't understand a discipline, really get the team to be captains and champions and train you and do reverse mentorship, because that's the only way you're going to get other people in the business to buy into the channels and disciplines and have that confidence. Because I've been in quite a few management meetings over my time, and the CMO gets flustered when people ask for CAC numbers or talk about acquisition numbers when they're from a brand background, or how does it all fit together? They struggle to translate that to people in the room. So I do definitely feel like there is this like learning curve where CPOs and other C-suite execs have actually understood the executive side of it as opposed to the department lead side.
Yeah. No, I've certainly been guilty of that myself in the past, of sort of trying to hold the cards in. It's, part of it is, this is our business. We understand it. You don't. Part of it is time. It's where you invest your time. And actually your point there about investing in that education of the others is how you get influence. That should be a priority, like grinding the teams, making sure everything's working. There's so many things to do. And You think that doing the work itself is the priority. That's what your team should be doing. That part of that C-suite, that executive level role, that's your time. Making sure you take those weekly meetings with CFO, COO, CPO. You're completely au fait with them behind the scenes before you get to that C-suite leadership meeting. They're already on side. They don't need to sidebar you with questions because you've already done it with them. They've already raised their concerns, not in front of the CEO. So you're not going to diminish things by having a sidebar question that's going to disrail your presentation or your KPI checks, whatever it is. So I think that's the crucial piece. And then, rely on your teams. The teams should be the ones doing the work. The team should be tactically, in fact, they should be tactically more astute than you. They're doing 100% of their time on channels. When was the last time like you or I did 100% of PPC bidding? Years ago, decades ago. So they are better at those tactical pieces and the execution pieces. That's their job. You just need to be aware of what they're doing, what's coming out the other end, and then having that capacity to puppeteer strategically and tactically with them. And then you feed back into those other meetings. And I think essentially that's the bit where I've gone wrong in the past is, I don't know, part of it is I just don't want to have another needless meeting about something. Genuinely, it's a needless meeting because it's not pushing forward. It's not promoting the business. It's not promoting the brand. It's not focusing on channel activity. This will get us more customers or retain more customers. In my head, that's my job. And actually, I'm not being open-minded enough to go, yeah, that's my job, but that should happen through my team. That's our job as a team. My job is making sure that our team isn't dismissed or held back because I haven't communicated well enough with my peers or with the CEO. There's a whole piece in there that we could probably talk for hours about those different relationships and how important it is for a department as changeable as marketing is. And I said it before, it's every day, every minute, every geo different. Tomorrow is different to yesterday. And today's been a mad one for whatever reason. The weather. No other department has that inconsistency. So with all of that going haywire, if you want to go pick holes, if someone's an excuse to kick holes in marketing, they can find one any day of the year. They can find 20 things that could be done significantly better. And then ask the question, well, why are you doing that? And I've had that in the leadership meetings. It drives you insane. You're like, you get the question. It's like, that's a kick in the nuts question because it's hard to do that to a CFO. It's hard to do that to a CPO who's got a sort of long runway out to product development. It's probably easier to do to a COO because then it's all encompassing and you can just go, this bit over here isn't working. It's really easy to do to a marketer. And again, we're low-hanging fruit. It's easy to blame. I mean, that's something I'd probably have to get onto as well is when things aren't going well, who do you point the finger at? And in the costly marketing department who isn't getting enough customers in, who's not keeping customers and making them spend even more this year than last, it's your fault, which is true to an extent. That's what we're there to do in many ways. It isn't entirely our responsibility to do all those things.
A lot of marketing leaders, where they struggle is they don't know where the lines are blurred. So they don't know actually, there isn't been formal conversation who owns what part. So in B2C businesses, generally, it's marketing's job to get people into the product, unless you're PLG. That's a whole other discussion. And then what happens is you land on the site, and then marketing have kind of had to take a step back and said, oh, okay, it's now on product. And then actually product goes all the way through. And when they've done an order and then they send through the automated response, the receipt or the order update, and then it gets handed back to marketing.
Yeah, CRM.
And then it's CRM or what have you. And very often that's just this informal blur that no one really understands and hasn't taken that time to understand where the passovers are. And that's something that I've experienced, as in having to pull people aside and say, hey, this is what actually happens. Who is responsible? And that's something, again, that's part of leadership. One recommendation I make to people, especially in the senior levels, is understand who owns what and when. Yeah. And then you can say, there's three phases. There's ownership, there's co-ownership, and there's collaboration. And if you don't have that clearly defined, people don't understand who is to blame or who isn't to blame. So if you own it, you have to take full responsibility. If you co-own it, you have to.
It's almost like doing a RACI for the entire business. We normally use those things when we're doing project management planning, and I lean into them so often. I mean, find them incredibly valuable, albeit normally overpopulated, but that's the nature of it. But a RACI for the whole business, and then you literally can draw lines and go, look, those lines, they aren't brick walls. Those lines are constant communication, they're constant collaboration. But when the customer passes that line, we literally hand them over to you. I think there was something interesting about this related to the revenue point. I saw on someone's LinkedIn post the other day, holding chief revenue officer and marketing accountable for all revenue. And the post whoever made it said it's impossible if marketing or the CRO or the CMO isn't responsible for every part of it, every part of the process. Because if you aren't, then how can you be responsible for the outcome? You don't control and are responsible for every single facet. If it goes well, everyone claims it. Success is a mother of several children, or whatever that phrase is. But I thought that was an interesting point about, if you don't have responsibility for every facet of something, you can't be held responsible for the positive or negative outcome of that thing. And I think sometimes marketers are. It's revenue's down. Like, well, sales is responsible for that. And by the way, the product shit. And operationally, we weren't working last week because people were striking, whatever it might be.
It comes with confidence. That comes with knowing what you own, co-own, and collaborate on. It's if the rest of the business understand that, and then they're pointing towards marketing, is rather than saying, "Oh, it's not our fault," it's what's the plan. So, again, another recommendation is 1 problem, 2 solutions. The problem is our preferred solution, problem solve will be this. If not, if you don't like that, here's our backup recommendation. So you lean 80% into your recommendation, 20% into your backup, and you say that this is the way we tackle it. And therefore we need this support and these people to support us on this. And very often that, in the moment, it's very difficult. But again, any leader can say, hey, I need to go away and actually talk to the experts in my team to work this through, or understand and diagnose if it's a big problem or it's an hourly problem or a daily problem. Because very often, like you said, the weather, we've had really hot days and everyone's traffic tanks, everyone's acquisitions and sales tank. And very often what then happens is there's someone who has to step up and say, this is what it was, this is why it was, this is either what we can do about it or this is what we can't do about it. So for me, it's a case of you have to be really clear in communication. You have to understand and diagnose the problem, translate it enough so everyone understands it. And I think that's what some marketeers and marketing leaders have kind of lost a little bit to growth, because growth in essence has an accountability for everything in it. So when someone is hired as a CGO, what most people want is a growth model pretty quickly. And then they want a formula so they can work out how it connects or if it doesn't. To be honest, that's where through summer coaching and actually through friends in the product world and having lived and run product teams before, they're now with AI are now being held responsible for delivery dates. They're being held responsible for how much revenue impact is that going to increase. So it's not solely a CMO issue now. It's definitely going to be the CPO going to be pulled into it. The ROI question is being applied across most of the business. What you have to be is really confident in your plan, super confident in your testing, and be ruthless around what you touched and how you influenced it. And obviously some of the tracking is going to be harder to do that, but for how the business and business leads have to sort of push the business forward, everyone's looking for growth, regardless of whether you say it or not, everyone is. You have to attach it to that. And if you're unaware of your part or it's difficult to work it out, you're going to have to fight for it. So one recommendation would be to move forward. If you're the marketing, have the most senior marketing title, whether it's a C-suite one or not, you have to be super confident in saying, this is how we influenced it. This is how we're going to influence it again in the future. And whether that's 15 touch points, that's just the nature of having 2 screens and constantly streaming, scrolling, subscribing, etc.
I think that would be my take as well. I think there's a whatever it takes about visibility of the what, whys, hows with all of those peers. Like that's the whatever it takes. The actual results, that's what you do. That's your day job with the team. That's your team's responsibility. That should inherently happen, and they should be plugging holes when they see them. Well operated, a well motivated team will do that. And then your role is to protect them and what they're doing and their opportunity to win by making the what and why and how front and center with all those other peers. And actually, you raised an interesting point there on the AI topic. I'm just waiting to see the first chief AI officer title being flung around, because that's actually, it's probably going to be beneficial when it does happen for marketers, because we're already expected to be pros in 500 new AI platforms that have sprung up in the last year. And again, it's another impossible one. Like there's an expectation that we will be one of the biggest users in any organization just because of the number of channels we operate. It's everything from creative to copy to development to app making to agent creation, whatever else, music generation. And it's great. This is part of our future. I'm very excited for it, but expecting an individual to be the most well-versed person in all of that and know which are the good ones and the bad ones, again, it's an impossible task. And there's going to be this period, it's going to go on for a long time, of test and learn, of we're trying this, we're using AI. I'm plugged into AI. I'm a modern marketer. Don't fire me. I'm ahead of the curve on all this shit, but I'm still working out how it works and what to use and how much to pay to which platform, because these are the best ones for us. And actually, look forward to taking that part of responsibility and then taking the challenge to a chief AI officer, technically attuned, and say, look, here's the list of things that we think we can lean on AI for. And what we're looking for is effectively an RFP, work out what the best ones are to plug in. If we can duplicate ones we're already using, between departments, even better, but we could do some help, because otherwise it's just yet another thing to bang us over the head with, is we aren't doing enough, or we fucked up because we used an AI platform that didn't work or had data problems or whatever it might be. And there's an element of fear about that. I'm really excited about what AI is going to bring to our industry, but there's an element of fear on longevity, because I will not be the only one who's unstuck. I know this is going to be a problem, is not having the best of the best of the best at all times.
One part on the AI discussion that most people have sort of forgotten is when Slack came out, or when Notion was introduced into businesses, the C-suite didn't invest the time in understanding the tools. And one of the recommendations I'm making often is getting in and spending time on tools. So block out the time in your calendar and learn the tools yourself. So yes, that you are super senior and you can't learn every tool, but what you do need to do is learn the best tools and learn how to get the message out there, or why it's better than others. And obviously other people in your team can take some of that responsibility, but get trained and understand the tool under the bonnet at least, because otherwise you're really going to struggle to get more money spent on another tool. And something that Google and Microsoft have been really smart at is incorporating their AI tools into your workflow. You just haven't necessarily used it or know that yet.
Yeah.
So I do think it's a huge opportunity. Google have already come out and said yesterday or today, we recorded on the 7th of May, about their new Max tool, which it's all highly optimized now, and you can create video and imagery and ad copy, etc. in it. So the tools they're already stepping forward and creating it to make our lives easier. So
I just want someone to come up with absolutely dominant best tools out there list, because every time I've changed jobs or got into a new interim client in the last 10 years, I literally, there's a crossover of about 20%, like Slack's in there almost always. Apart from that, you've got G Suite, which you may or may not use. So then you've got a different HR tool for your performance tracking and team management. You've got a different analytics tool. You've got a different dashboard set up. Looker comes up twice in a row and you're like, yay, I don't have to relearn how to create dashboards. Other than that, the whole thing is a shitstorm. You just really want, I don't know, maybe I just want Google just to dominate and say, we're building a tool for everything that is better than everyone else's and cheaper. And all these other ones can just, I don't know, be purchased or disappear. It just takes up so much time.
Unfortunately, with the monopoly problems at the moment and all the
I'm all right with monopolies. I mean, it's not that they haven't got a monopoly already. So let's stop pretending.
Exactly. Let's do a quick fire and sort of and go back and forth on some questions just to help people out a little bit or give your hot take on it. Do you think the fractional CMOs have caused an issue with of how marketing's been perceived within companies?
No, I think fractional is just another name for consultancy, to be honest. I mean, it's a fits a niche, and I've talked about this in various articles and probably in the newsletter as well, is we're really good at coming up with acronyms and coming up with things that make us sound clever and sound creative because we innovate with a new name for something. And all that's doing is marginally us further. You know, it's making us speak even more of a foreign language, which people don't like because they don't really get it. I'm all about simplicity. So I don't necessarily think it's caused that problem, but I think calling these things various names doesn't necessarily add anything at all. It's just another name for marketing consultancy.
How about, do you think that the CMO not being on the board or traditionally not being on boards, do you see that as a problem for the CMO role in general?
Yes. Yeah, because if they're on boards, then there'd be a seat at the table at the highest level of decision making in the organization saying, stop it. But what does that mean for the marketing or the brand or the performance team or this part of our growth future? Without that seat at the table, and I've been in this problem before several times, decision gets made and you go, well, hang a sec, did anyone ask about this? And of course they didn't, because they haven't got 25 years of experience in asking those very questions. So of course things can get missed. Other things get prioritized because people are inherently selfish. All of us are as human beings. We covet things, we look after our own. So in those board meetings, you look after your domain because it's your area of expertise. And if the marketing area of expertise isn't represented, then marketing balls will hit the floor and smash. So yes, it's a problem.
Do you think that CMOs have struggled with org design and understanding how to build their organization for, rather than just replacing skills, to actually understand the next 18 months of the role? Do you think there's been a problem or a disconnection there?
I think that's probably a sort of, you have to look instance by instance on that one. I'm sure there are marketers out there that are really good at org design who've created flawless models, but again, those flawless models do have a habit of getting shifted and changed, and the person who made them getting let go early, which will then allow that old model to change with the next pair of hands that gets ownership of it. So I think org design is a crucial part of any sort of team's function, but it does need to fit organically into the shape of the business as well. And that by definition means that's a collaboration. Even though your team can look one shape, you need to make sure that it fits. And simple stuff as well. I mean, how many exercises have you done when you've sat down with an HR director and gone, the fucking job title hierarchy in this company is a joke. We've got VPs, managers, heads of, leads, executives, and you've got executives down there on this pay grade and one's over there because you've inherited and you've given new job titles instead of pay increases because people are lazy and they do that. Those are problems. And I think universal org design, that should be the senior leadership team supported by the HR department, who should be the experts in all things new and trendy in functional org design in the modern age. That should be a collaborative project. I don't think people treat things like that as projects in the same way, building a new website or building a new platform for your digital product or building a new car. You know, these are projects people take seriously. And ironically enough, building the engine and structure and foundations of your own business via org design probably isn't given as the same level of weight and priority, which is an error.
Do you think many of us have over-indexed on specialists and not generalists?
God, good question. My gut instinct is no, because I think specialists moving up to become T-shaped marketers, it's quite a common path. You know, people start at one thing, become experts, and then as they get towards head of level and beyond, they learn what the other channels can do. They've been sitting next to them for so long, they've become acclimatized to them. Whereas generalists, you know, they've never had that subject matter expertise, but arguably they have started at a younger age, having a span across all of them. I think the qualities of a great marketer don't come down to that binary choice. I think the qualities are many, many other things instead.
I have a hypothesis that many specialists will have to become generalists in this new
Well, you have
AI
to
dominated
eventually
world.
anyway. I mean, if you're an SEO, expert and you've done sort of 7 years and you're really bloody good at it, it comes to maybe director level. If you want to get to head of, be responsible for performance marketing and SEO and content. You have to spread out and generalize. You have to be more expansive in your scope. So I think that's a given.
Cool. To wrap up, how have you got sort of 3 themes that you can, or 3 recommendations you can make? So CMOs and those who want to step up into becoming a CMO or a version of, to future-proof themselves for the next couple of years.
Well, I think the biggest one from our chat today is that investing the time and effort in communication with your senior leadership peers about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Don't hold cards close to your chest. Be open, be pragmatic about those conversations, and that'll sort of save pain down the road. I think that relationship with the CFO would be number 2. They are the critical decision maker alongside the CEO, but the CEO may not have the time, may not have the capacity. The CFO is the one who holds your purse strings ultimately. And like you said, can be the one that actually says yo and A to the biggest decisions. Make sure that that relationship is bulletproof. Prove to them that you are a data monster, even if you need support from your team members to become that data monster and be all over the numbers every single morning. That's going to give the CMO that encouragement, that peace of mind that you're always on it. And you can do the creative stuff, you can do the crunchy, dirty, grimy number stuff too. That's vitally important and will only get more so. And then the third one is this AI future. I think for everyone in a marketing hat or any other hat, to be honest, beyond making images and LinkedIn posts with ChatGPT, there's a realm of stuff. I mean, I'm not saying making, I'm having a go at making trance music using Sooner and then making videos for that on Leonardo's new 4K video capability, just for fun, because I want to play with them, playing with the AI. And then, in the work environment, embedding. It is part of our future. And those who are more fluent in what it can do and which platforms do it best in different guises, they're going to be the more valuable ones who get the bigger jobs and last for longer. So I think that's now a must do.
I agree. My 3 or 4, they're all sort of interconnected. As you said, you have to learn how to become an executive. So not just a team head or department lead. I think you have to understand when to leverage IQ, EQ, and PQ, political intelligence. I think that you have to remember your positive impact on the company and on the numbers and you have to understand how to prove it. So whether you have to spend a long time in it, you're going to have to, because other department leads are now under the same sort of stress and strain as we are. And they're also having their titles changed and chopped and changed constantly. Another area for me is when you're communicating hard, you have to learn how to communicate hard decisions and you have to be comfortable in making them. And very often marketing have had the easy or hard end, depending which way you look at it. I actually think now it's all about how you communicate and understand how to translate that, because it ripples through the business, and marketing often is the largest department now. The first or the biggest priority for anyone is to learn actually your business and the business you're connected to, understand how it makes and loses money, and how you complement it. And then the third thing for me is just constantly evolve. And if you learn how to evolve and where the space is going, you truly understand how to be successful. And you can make some wrong decisions and take some wrong paths, but you have to know that you're on the right path and inspire those around you to join you. And I think very often CMOs are the ones that struggle the most with this. So for me, that's what I recommend. And it's coming up over and over in my coaching. So Harry, I think we haven't necessarily answered the biggest problem for CMOs, and which isn't a title, but I think what we have done is given people the executive look and appear into the future with recommendations throughout. So I think we've done quite a good job.
From discussion, that's a good start, mate. And for the first Marketing Unfiltered podcast, I mean, there'll be more. We'll probably come back to this topic.
Exactly. Thanks for listening, everyone.